Hello, everybody. I hope you are having a wonderful Friday. If you need me at all, I am still in the building. I'm just going to be in the gym all day working on the blood drive. So if you need me, you can come get me, and I will be there in just a hot minute. Okay, just give me a minute to get on up there. So today's lesson is 5.3, changing elevation. You do have homework tonight. We're not going to have a quiz since we've only done 3 lessons. We're not going to have a quiz until next Friday. Just there's not going to be much to cover, so it's kind of pointless. So we're going to wait until next Friday to have a quiz. So you do have homework. It's homework 5.3. It's on GoFormative. I always have paper copies up front. Help yourself to whatever you want or need. And then make sure that it's done on Monday, please. So we have learning targets always, of course. That was kind of silly to say. But our learning target today is I can use the rules for adding positive and negative numbers. So make sure you write that in your notebook. So yesterday we looked at adding positive and negative numbers on a number line. So you can still use a number line. However, the numbers we're going to use today are quite large and they're not going to be always whole numbers. So it might be a little more difficult. Okay. So we're going to actually look at the rules for adding and subtracting today. Or not subtracting, sorry, just adding. Subtracting will be another day, whenever that is. I don't know. So get all this written down, and once you are ready, let's go ahead and move on to our warm-up. So our warm-up is that's the opposite. And so the first 2 problems, I'm giving you number lines, and I would like you to represent the situations on the number lines. And then the last 3 problems are just what's the opposite. So our first problem, our first situation is the temperature was negative 5 degrees, and then it rose 5 degrees. The next situation is a climber was 30 feet above sea level, then she descended 30 feet. So remember, when you are filling out the number lines, make sure to, hang on. Make sure to put a dot on our starting temperature, our starting number, and then use the arrows to represent the change. Next, we have what's the opposite of? Running 150 feet east. What about walking down 10 steps? What about pouring 8 gallons into a fish tank? Okay, so give me the opposite of those. Now, you're going to go ahead, pause here, try these problems, come back once you're ready. All right, let's go ahead and go over these. So first problem, the temperature was negative 5 degrees. That is our starting amount. So we're going to put a dot over negative 5. Now we need to use an arrow to represent the change. Our change is that it rose 5 degrees. Now, since we are rising, we are getting larger. So our arrow is going to point towards the right where numbers get larger. So it's going to start at negative 5 and we're going to increase 5. So our increase, each dash is going to be worth an additional 5. So we only have to increase 1 dash. Okay, we don't have to go 5 dashes up. Each dash is worth 5. So we just have to go up 1. Our ending temperature is going to be 0. Now next, sorry, goodness. A climber was 30 feet above sea level, so that means they are at a positive 30. And then she descended 30 feet. So descending means to go down. We're decreasing. We're going to go towards numbers that are smaller. Our arrow is going to point towards the left. And so she descended 30 feet. So again, I'm going to start at 30, and I'm just going to count 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, and 30. So when I stop, I'm at 0 again. Crazy. So now let's look at what's the opposite of running 150 feet east. So we can just say running 150 feet west. Okay, the opposite of east is west. Now you could also say the opposite of running is walking. So we're going to walk 150 feet west. Whatever your heart desires. Okay, go for it. You don't have to go that in depth. If you want, you can. Next, what's the opposite of walking down 10 steps? You can tell me walking or running, but you don't have to. Again, okay, so the opposite of walking down 10 steps would be walking up 10 steps. What's the opposite of pouring 8 gallons into a fish tank? Well, that would be taking 8 gallons. Hey, you're messing with my paper. Gallons out of the fish tank. Okay, make sure to get all this down. And once you are ready, let's go ahead and, yeah, there was something there, Eris. Go. Let's go ahead and move on to the next slide. Okay. So first activity, cliffs and caves. A mountaineer is climbing up a cliff or climbing on a cliff. Okay. We're going to talk about whether she's going up or down in a second. She's 200 feet above the ground. So her current elevation is a positive 200 feet. If she climbs up more, this is going to be a positive change because she's increasing her elevation. If she climbs down, this is going to be a negative change because she's decreasing her elevation. So we have this table to fill out. We're given our starting elevation, which is a positive 200 all the way through. And we're giving some change in elevation and asked to find the final elevation. And we're given some final elevation and asked to find the change. So remember, a positive change means we're going up. A negative change means we're going down. So for the first one, we're increasing, we're going up. Our final elevation should be higher than our starting elevation. For the next one, our change in elevation is a negative, which means we're going down. So our final elevation should be lower than the starting elevation. On the next 3 problems, our final elevation is what we are given. So if our final elevation is higher than our starting elevation, like this one, that means our change in elevation is going to be a positive. If our final elevation is lower than our starting elevation, like this one, that means our change in elevation is going to be a negative. Okay, so go ahead, try these problems, and come back once you're ready. All right, so for our first one, we start at 200 and our change in elevation is positive 70, so we're going up 70 feet. Well, if we start at 200 and go up 70, our final elevation is going to be a positive 270 feet. Okay, I added those 2 numbers. Pretty simple, right? For the next one, our change in elevation is a negative. We're going down. So we start at 200 and we go down 120. Okay, I'm going to subtract these 2 numbers, 20 minus 120. That gives me a positive 80. Now, for the next one, we're given our starting elevation and we need to find our final elevation. So we know from 200 to 300 we increased. So our change in elevation is going to be a positive. How much we increased? Well, we increased 100 feet from 200 to 300. That's a 100-foot increase. So I'm going to add 100 feet. Okay. Now on the next one, from 200 to 110, we decreased. Our change in elevation is going to be negative. Now, from 200 to 110, to figure out what that difference is, or to figure out what that change is, we can subtract these. We can do 200 minus 110 to find that change in elevation. And that's going to be 90. So our change in elevation is negative 90. Okay, so then 200 minus 90 would be 110. Now for the last one, okay, so we're going to, just like here, when I said we could do 200 minus 110, we're going to subtract these as well. So we know from 200 to 35.2, that is a decrease. We went down. Now we just need to figure out how much we went down by subtracting. So when we add or subtract decimals, you always have to line up your decimals, okay? However, 200 doesn't have a decimal. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to give it one. I'm just going to add it at the end right here. And then I'm going to add 35.2, or not add it, but I'm going to write it down, is what I meant. And so now every number that doesn't have a buddy, our 2's don't have a buddy, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to give them the buddy 0. And now we can subtract. I cannot do 0 minus 2. Okay, I cannot do that. I need to go next door. But there is nothing to borrow next door. So I go next door again. And yet again, there is nothing to borrow next door. So finally, I go over to my 2. I borrow 1 from my 2. And it becomes 1. I'm going to take that 1, break it down into 10 pieces, and add 10 to this 0. Now I can borrow 1 from this 10, making it 9. And this 0 now becomes a 10. And yet again, I'm going to borrow 1 from this 10, making it 9. And finally, the 0 becomes 10. Now I can do 10 minus 2, which is 8. 9 minus 5 is 4. 9 minus 3 is 6. 1 minus 0 is 1. Our last step is to bring our decimal straight down into our answer. So our answer is going to be 164.8. Boom. Okay, that's it. Pretty simple when we have a positive starting elevation. Okay, so get all this down, check your answers, and once you're ready, let's go ahead and move on to cliffs and caves part 2. So now we're talking about a splunker. A splunker is somebody that explores caves, and they are down in a cave next to the cliff. So her current elevation is, since she's down, she's at negative 20 meters. So now we're talking about meters. Notice our change in labels. So if she climbs down deeper into the cave, it's going to be a negative. Again, we're going down. We're decreasing even more, and that's a negative. If we climb up, we're increasing. So again, it's going to be a positive. So this one's going to be harder because we don't have that positive to work with. So we have a negative starting elevation. We have some change in elevations, and we're asked to find the final elevation. And we have some final elevations, and we're asked to find our change in elevation. So I would like to remind you, and this might help just a wee bit, okay, to go from negative 20 to 0. That is a 20, okay? That's a difference of 20 from negative 20 to 0. Okay, so that might be helpful. Hopefully that's helpful. Okay, pause here. Try these problems. Come back once you're ready. Okay, so for this, we got to think logically about it, okay? So, our first problem, we start at negative 20. Our change in elevation is negative 15. That means we're going down 15 meters. So, if we start at negative 20 and go down 15 more, this is going to be negative 35. Okay, I'm going down. Next, we have a change in elevation of positive 30. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, again, think logically about this. We use 20 of these meters to get to 0. That means we have 110 left. So 0 would be just getting out of the cave, and then they're going up. They're going to climb that cliff an additional 110 meters. okay? Because that's what's left over once we use the 20 to get out of the cave, okay? So we're going to end up with a final elevation of a positive 110. Okay, now again, it's going to be harder because now we have final elevations. Okay, so from negative 20 to a positive 61, we increased. That means we went up positive. Okay, so now we're going to figure out how many do we need to get from negative 20 to 61. So let's think about that. To go from negative 20 to 0, we have 20. Then to go from 0 to 61, that's an additional 61. So we have 20 plus the 61. Okay, that's going to be 81. So our change in elevation is 81 meters. Now, from negative 20 to negative 5. We're still in the negatives, but we increased. Negative 5 is closer to being out of the cave than negative 20 is. So we're increasing. Okay, we have a positive change in elevation. Now, to go from negative 20 to negative 5. Okay, that is a 15 meter difference from negative 20 to 5. Okay, so this means our change in elevation is going to be a positive 15. Next, from negative 20 to negative 50. Negative 50 is smaller than negative 20. We went further down into the cave. If we're going down inside that cave more, that means we're doing a negative change in elevation. So from negative 20 to negative 50, that is a 30 meter change. Now next, we have a change in elevation. Again, we're getting a little bit harder because now we're dealing with decimals, but it's okay. So again, remember to get from 20 to 0, negative 20 to 0, we have to use 20. So we're going to use up 20 of these to get just to 0, and we're going to be left with 7.5. So we still have a positive 7.5 meters that we're going to climb up. And at the end, we're going to be left at a positive 7.5. Okay. Now we need, for our very last problem, we need to figure out the change in elevation from negative 20 to a positive 73.5. So again, we went up and out of that cave and up that cliff. So this is a positive change in elevation. Now, from negative 20 to 0, that is a 20 meter difference, okay? I know I keep saying it again, but I'm just making sure we got it. And then from 0 to 73.5, that is going to be, obviously, 73.5. So we have 20 and the 73.5. Okay, that's going to be 93.5 altogether. So, real quick, we're going to go ahead and we're going to talk about some of these rules that we might have seen, okay? So, when we did a negative and a negative, when we added those two, our answer stayed a negative, and it, that the digit itself that has the magnitude, it increased, okay? When we added 20 plus 15, got 35, and made it a negative. When we did a negative and a positive, what we did is we subtracted those two. Okay, so 130 minus 20 is going to give us 110. Okay, now to figure out from negative 20 how we got up to 61, we added these two. Okay, we added 20 and 61 and got 81. Now, here, from negative 20 to negative 5, we subtracted those, okay? Negative 20 to negative 50, again, we subtracted those. So notice when they're both negative and we're trying to find that change, we subtracted. And notice when it was a negative and a positive and we try to find that change, we added, okay? Now, again, down here, from how we found our change in elevation, okay, we subtracted these just like we did up here. 27.5 minus 20 is going to be 7.5. And then again, we have a positive final elevation and a negative starting elevation. Okay, just like up here, we're going to add those two. Okay. Now, we're going to talk more about rules. However, one thing that I'm going to have you guys write down, and it's not going to be until Monday when I see you next. Yes. So I'm going to have you guys write this down then. But it's going to be that adding. Ooh, can you see? Yep. Adding a negative is the same thing as subtracting a positive. So we see that a few times. Okay. And we see that right here. So when we add a negative, when we add these two, it's like subtracting a positive. Okay, this is like 130 minus 20. And again, we see that down here. Okay, so 27.5 minus 20 gives us that 7.5. Now, again, that only works when it's our change in elevation and we know our starting elevation. Okay, if you get stuck, draw a diagram. Okay, you know, we're in our little cave. Okay, here's our little cave. We're 20 feet. We're right here. Okay, little person. And this is negative 20. Negative 20. And then we have our cliff up out of the cave. And so to get from here to our cliff, this takes 20 meters. That's a 20-meter difference. And then if we end up outside of the cliff, we're going to take that 20 meters and we're going to add how far we went up. So, for example, the 61. So, we ended up at 61. Well, we had to go that 20, and then we had to go an additional 61. We added those. That's how we got the 81. Okay, up 20, up an additional 61, 81. Okay, I know, I'm sorry, I spent a lot of time talking on this slide. So, let's go ahead and we will move on to our last slide for cliffs and caves. So our starting elevation changes for all of these. And then again, we're either given a change in elevation or a final elevation. So go ahead, pause here, try it, come back once you're ready. So if we start at a positive 200 meters, and we go down, because our change in elevation is a negative. We went down 200 meters. Well, those are opposites. And that's going to give me a final elevation of 0. We go up 200, back down 200. And we end up at our starting point, which is 0. Okay, for this one, we went down 30. We're at a negative 30. Our change in elevation is a positive 30. So we're going back up 30. Again, we're doing the opposite. We're going to end up at 0. Now, some of you might be like, well, hey, I see the pattern, Miss Grant, because our next two final elevations are at 0, and you keep saying something about an opposite. So I'm pretty sure those answers are going to be opposites, and you're incredibly right. So for our next one, our starting elevation is at a positive 6.5, and we want to end up at 0. Well, we're going to have to go down 6.5. So our change in elevation is going to be a negative 6.5. And then if we start at negative 150 and we want to end at 0, we're going to have to go up 150. So our change in elevation is going to be a positive 150. Now, These are called opposites. Opposites are positive and negative versions of the same number. So the opposite of negative 150 is positive 150. The opposite of positive 200 is negative 200. And as we see here, every time you add opposites, your answer is always 0. Okay, that's something big to take away. When you add opposites, your answer will always be 0. Okay, and that's going to help us on our last slide. Okay, I'm going to pause here. Get your answers down. And let's move on to our very last slide. Adding rational numbers. Okay, so we have some numbers. Okay, first one whole numbers, last one whole numbers. Very long. I get it. Okay, tons and tons of numbers. Number 2 has decimals. Remember what we know about decimals. Add your line up your decimals. Make sure every number has a buddy. If it doesn't have a buddy, give it a buddy. The number 0. Okay, everybody's buddy. The number 0. And then number 3, adding fractions. Remember, you cannot add fractions unless your bottom number is exactly the same. In this case, it is not. So we're going to have to make 2 and 4 the same number. This should be easy. You should know how to turn one of these numbers into the other. So go ahead, pause here, and come back once you are ready. Okay, let's start with the first one. PEMDAS states you always start with the numbers inside the parentheses. So that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to add 30 plus 5. 30 plus 5 is simple, 35, right? Okay, positive 35. Okay, I'm sorry. It is very late. I still haven't had dinner, so I might seem a little sassy or something. Okay, and we're rolling with it tonight. Okay, so this is going to be negative 35 plus a positive 35. Oh my goodness. These are opposites. And what did we just talk about? When we add opposites, our answer will always be 0. Awesome sauce. Okay. Next. Number 2. Now we have negative 0.15, negative 0.85, plus 12.5. Now I would like to go back. And when we added negative numbers, our signs stayed a negative, and we just added our 2 numbers. We're going to do the same thing here. Okay, so I'm going to go to our 2 negatives, and I'm going to add these. So off to the side, okay, 0.15 plus 0.85. I'm going to add them. 5 plus 5 is 10. 1 plus 1 is 2. 2 plus 8 is 10. 1 plus 0 is 1. Bring our decimal straight down. So when we add all these together, we just get 1. Now, since they're negative, both of these are negatives, our answer will also be a negative. Okay? So when I add these 2 numbers, that's what I'm going to do first. We get negative 1 plus 12.5. Now, a reminder, again, when we add a negative and a positive, adding a negative is the same thing as subtracting a positive. Okay, same thing. It's what we did here. We subtracted the answers. That's what I'm going to do here. 12.5 minus 1 gives us a positive. Oh, sorry. A positive 11.5. Okay. Positive. Okay. Up next. Before we do anything, before we think about anything, 1.5 we're going to make into 2/4. Why 2/4? Well, 4 times 2. Wow, sorry, back up. 2 times 2 is 4. So I'm going to take a half. I'm going to multiply both the top and the bottom by 2, giving us 2/4. Now we have the same denominator. Okay, the same bottom number. Now we have 2/4 plus negative 3/4. Now this one's harder. Okay, because if I have 2/4 and I subtract 3/4, well, I don't have enough. I'm going to end up in the negatives. Okay, so I'm going to have 2/4. I'm going to take away 3/4. I'm going to need an extra 1/4 for that. I'm going to end up in the negatives, 1/4. Okay, so think of it this way. I have 2/4. I owe somebody 3/4 of my pizza. Okay, I have 2/4 of a pizza. Half of a pizza. I owe somebody 3/4. Okay, but I ate too much. Okay, so they're going to take all my 2/4. And I'm going to owe them, going to be negative an additional 1/4 of a pizza. Okay, I know, I'm really hungry right now. We're getting pizza tonight. That's why I talked about a pizza. Okay. Up next, this long 10 digit. Yeah, ridiculous, right? You're going to be mad at what the answer is. I promise. So, 10 plus 21 plus 32 plus 43 plus 54 plus a negative 54 plus a negative 43 plus a negative 32 plus a negative 21 plus a negative 10. We have 2 ways that we can solve this. I can add all my positives together, add all my negatives together, and then subtract those. However, I'm going to let you know that will be making more work on yourself, because I notice that a lot of these have opposites. I'm going to move my opposites by each other real quick. So this is going to be 10 plus a negative 10 plus 21 plus negative 21 plus 43 plus negative 43 plus, I skipped a number, 32. I didn't mean to skip that. Plus 32 plus negative 32 plus 54 plus negative 54. Okay, if you notice, every number has an opposite. 10 plus negative 10, 0. 21 plus negative 21, 0. 43 plus negative 43, 0. 32 plus negative 32, 0. 54 plus a negative 54, 0. So what do all these zeros get us? Absolutely nothing. 0. That is our final answer. And that is it. I know. I told you you would be mad. All those numbers for it to be nothing. Okay, go ahead, get this down. Make sure you got it. Show me something. Okay, because these will be the problems that you would see on your test. Okay, not this. I'm not that big of a jerk. I'm not going to give you number 4 on your test. I swear to God. Promise. Pinky promise. Okay. However, you would see something like this. Okay, or even something like that. Yes, you do have to do fractions. I was not lying about that last week. I swear. Okay. All right. Now, synthesis. Okay. Go get one from the teacher. Miss Buckwalter should be covering for me. Thank you, Miss Buckwalter. Okay, let's talk about this. Our synthesis. After you get it. Don't leave me yet. Let's talk about it, please. Okay? When we add a number and its opposite, remember positive and negative version. Okay? If we're looking at positive 12, the opposite is negative 12. If we're looking at negative 7, the opposite is positive 7. And when we add these numbers, something magical happens. It's always 0. Always. And these are called the additive inverse. Okay? Now, technically, it's not a vocabulary word because you should already know this for some reason. But yes, it's called the additive inverse. And that is one of our standards. Okay, if I give you a number, I need you to know the opposite, and I need you to be able to tell me that they always add to 0. Okay. Hello, Hera. Next, when we add numbers with the same sign, that means they're both positive or they are both negative. We add their absolute values. That is a number's distance away from 0. So 12 is 12 away from 0. Negative 12, again, is 12 away from 0. And then we're just going to go ahead. We're going to add these numbers and we're going to keep the same sign. So positive 12 plus positive 7. 12 plus 12 is 19. It's positive. Keep it as a positive. Negative 12 plus negative 9. 12 plus 12 is 7. They're both negative. Keep it a negative. Now, when we add two numbers with different signs, we're going to subtract their absolute values. Subtract the numbers, okay? So then, how we decide what their sign is going to be, whatever number was larger, okay? Whatever absolute value, whatever the distance from 0, whatever that was larger, that's what sign we use. So for the first one, negative 12 plus positive 7. Okay, 12 minus 7 is 5. Since 12 is larger, we're going to keep it a negative. Our answer is going to be a negative. Now, positive 12 plus negative 7. Again, 12 minus 7 is 5. 12 is larger, and it is positive this time. So that answer is going to be 5. Okay. Now again, we can also think of adding a negative is the same thing as subtracting a positive. So 12 minus 7 is 5, and it's positive. Okay. All right. That's all I have to say. I miss you. I hope you have a wonderful weekend, because it's Friday. I mean, it's not Friday in the video, it's Wednesday, but it's Friday where you are. I hope you have a great Friday, a great weekend. I miss you. If you see me, say hi. I'm rambling. Sorry, the video is already long enough. Okay, love you guys. Bye.